It finally happened. SpaceX Static fires their Gigantic Super-Heavy Starship rocket booster. How did it go? SpaceX's second Starship launch tower is going up faster than a rocket, but it's still running late? SpaceX's new version 2 Starship is now under construction. Is it really that much better? NASA's SLS moon rocket arrives in Florida for its first launch with people to the moon. My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. Starship updates. Wow, it has finally happened. Although, should I really be saying finally? SpaceX's speed has been nothing short of extraordinary over the past week with the booster alone. It was fueled and tested nearly daily. And all that testing culminated in a spectacle SpaceX has already begun to make look routine. I am, of course, talking about the flap test. Look at them wiggle. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I am talking about the full 33-engine static fire of the most powerful rocket the world has ever seen. Wow, that was incredible. SpaceX soon after confirmed on X that it was, in fact, a full-duration static fire, likely with all 33 engines. SpaceX performs these static fires to ensure the engines are operating properly and that all systems look normal to lift the 5 million kilogram or 11 million pound skyscraper into space. We were up in our heli again, and thanks to Redline helicopter tours, we were also able to get a good look at the launch mount after the static fire. Other than some scorch marks, it looks to be unscathed. This is the last major test SpaceX needs to perform on Booster 12 before a full wet dress rehearsal, or WDR, where both the booster and the upper stage Starship are stacked and fully fueled with all systems simulating a countdown till launch. Now, with the static fire out of the way, SpaceX needs to perform post-static fire checks and any final preparations still required before the full wet dress and the launch. You know what that means? It is time for the booster to roll back to the production yard for those checks. This is why on the 16th we saw the chopsticks move into position around Booster 12 before lifting the 71 meter or 233 foot steel can into the air. The chopsticks lifting arms then moved the booster into position over the transport stand before lowering it into place, where it stayed for 30 minutes before once again being lifted. It appears something wasn't quite working, as teams were seen going into man lifts to perform some quick work on the booster before it was lowered back down about an hour later. Moving over to Tower B, it looks like SpaceX decided to give the tower some miracle grow. It has now grown another section taller, with SpaceX lifting and stacking the second module of the tower on the 16th. That means it took 5 days, almost to the minute, for SpaceX to go from stacking Module 1 to stacking Module 2. In the last episode, we wondered if SpaceX might perform any work on the internals before lifting the next segment to the top. And now we have our answer. It looks like SpaceX is instead focusing on speed and leaving connecting pipes for later. As we have been saying for the past few months, due to the majority of the internals for each segment being completed on the ground, once SpaceX starts stacking the tower, it's going to fly up. And this isn't even all. Just like with the first module, the same night Tower Module 2 was stacked, another road closure followed, so it was pretty clear what SpaceX was going to do next. Yep, on the night of the 16th, Module 3 was rolled to the second launch tower. From here, it'll be hooked up to the crane and lifted onto the tower. However, as fast as SpaceX is going, it appears they are actually behind schedule. But how can we know this? Well, we know this because of an FAA filing that stated the first 6 sections of the tower would be stacked by the 27th, and at this rate, they will only have 4 sections stacked by then. It's also important to note that this delay was likely caused by the 2 hurricanes that only grazed Starbase but slowed operations. So SpaceX will either need to speed up or extend the filing. Thanks to our recent flyover with Redline Heli, we were also able to spot a few interesting developments around the launch site. For starters, it appears that the initial prep work on the new orbital launch mount has stopped for now. We saw this start a few weeks ago with more piling, but soon after it halted. However, it might resume soon once again, as our photographer John was able to spot this. But what is this? Well, these are bags of bore gel, which is used when drilling or boring, which SpaceX needs to do to build supports for the massive and heavy structures at Starbase and keep them from sinking. This could suggest that SpaceX will once again be drilling down to place supports for a large structure. The other thing we were able to spot on our flyover was this giant pit SpaceX appears to have constructed. It appears to have similar dimensions to the tower segments, and it's unclear what exactly this is, but it could be a reverse water tower. A what? Or in other words, a retention pond similar to the one near the first tower, just smaller. But what do you think this pit is? Place your bets in the comments below, let's see who can get it right. Did you know you can take a helicopter ride over Starbase and get the same views as in our videos? Visit redlineheli.com/Felix to book your own helicopter ride over Starbase with $25 off. Give it a try, you'll love it. Our next stop is a short way down Highway 4 along the shoreline to the center of all Starship production, where we have seen a ton of new activity. But before I tell you about that, we've also looked into our channel metric and over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not yet subscribed. Help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter for exclusive SpaceX updates. With it, you get access to daily Starbase photo galleries, including satellite, aerial, and ground photos of SpaceX's progress, and countless other extras on top. And no matter how much you decide to give, everyone gets the same supporter content and access. You decide what you want to give. Thank you very much. Alright, now on to the build site. This is where SpaceX is constantly building and developing Starship and Super Heavy. Our first stop is the 3 construction bays located on the edge of the build site next to the Sanchez lot. Currently there are at least 2 vehicles located in each bay. Well, at least part of a vehicle. So without further ado, let's take a look into the Mega Bay. Specifically Mega Bay 1. After Booster 12's successful static fire campaign, SpaceX rolled it back to the first Mega Bay at the production or build site. As said earlier, this move is so that SpaceX can do final checks and preps on Booster 12 before its flight and catch test. Booster 12 may possibly be the first Super Heavy to attempt a landing on the Mechazilla arms, also known as chopsticks. The arms have to close in around the booster as it hovers above them, which is a maneuver requiring great precision. This means that it's absolutely essential to make sure that Booster 12 is ready and that no engines will be going out on ascent or descent. As you can see here, the chopsticks are mounted on the tower in a way that they can scale the entirety of it in order to lift, catch, and stack Starship rockets. This is why SpaceX is also equipping Tower B with these chopstick arms. While not installed yet, they have been delivered to Starbase. As a matter of fact, they are currently located just behind the Mega Bay in the lot known as the Sanchez site. This is where the rest of the tower sections are being worked on and where they are being stored ahead of stacking. The chopsticks will only be lifted onto the tower once all 9 sections have been stacked atop the base. This means it's still some ways out, but it's approaching rapidly. Now before we examine the second Mega Bay, let's take a look inside the High Bay. This is where SpaceX builds the smaller Starship upper stage as opposed to the larger bay next door, which is used for Super Heavy. Ship 30, the vehicle that will fly on Flight 5, is currently located here. Ship 33's nose cone and payload bay are also here as they are being stacked. If you've been following our updates since Flight 4, then you'll know that Ship 30 has been undergoing tile replacement across the entire vehicle. This is so that they can install the new ablative felt underneath, which will act as a second line of defense during re-entry. This process started about a month ago and seems to be nearly complete. In the last episode, the tip of the nose cone had nearly been completed and the aft flaps had just received all their missing tiles. As you can see here, the nose cone tip has now been completely finished with tiles going all the way around. There are a couple of tiles missing slightly lower on the nose cone, but these are relatively few and will likely be reinstalled soon. The only part of the ship that hadn't seen its tiles being installed were the forward flaps that are responsible for guiding the ship during its landing. However, now it seems that this has changed. Since our last episode, tiles have covered the entire face of the visible forward flaps. This also means that the other flap has likely received its tiles as well. Now, it may seem like all the tiles have been replaced on this vehicle. However, some of the tiles were never removed in the first place. I'm specifically talking about the tiles surrounding the flap hinges. These, along with the perimeter of the flaps, never saw their tiles removed and they still retain the originals. This is curious, since the hinge was the main point of failure during Flight 4. Elon mentioned a hinge upgrade for future flights, however with Flight 5 nearing so quickly, it is unlikely that it'll get a complete overhaul. It's more likely to just receive extra reinforcement and more careful tile work. Although the tiles haven't been removed here yet, it's still possible that they might. Since Booster 12 still has to undergo final preps before flight, SpaceX certainly has enough time to remove these tiles and add some ablative, which I think is the most likely scenario. They might also choose not to replace the tiles at all if the goal of Starship Flight 5 isn't as focused on re-entry. However, this would be pretty surprising. As always, we will keep you updated on the fate of this prototype, and if SpaceX removes these tiles, you'll be the first to know. Always worth subscribing. Seems that the work on this prototype is nearly complete, and with a successful static fire under its belt, the next major milestone is rollout and final stacking. Now, there are certainly people who are wondering what happened to the two sections of Ship 33 that we saw. Well, we have an answer for you. Ship 33 is most likely the vehicle that will fly on Flight 7. The surprising completeness of this prototype is in line with speculation that Ship 32 will be skipped altogether in favor of these newer prototypes. The Block 2 Starship 33 was only recently spotted, as it had been prefabricated inside the Star Factory. Currently, only the nose cone and the payload bay sections have been spotted, and they were swiftly rolled into the high bay. As we've discussed before, this ship will feature many upgrades and changes as it is part of SpaceX's next-gen Block 2 Starship. Along with being taller, it will also have a lower dry mass for more propellant and feature redesigned flaps. When this ship flies, it will become the new world's most powerful rocket. Unfortunately, our view of this ship is obscured by the walls of the high bay and Ship 30. Except, it turns out SpaceX's giant window also acts as a giant mirror under the right conditions, and Lab Padre was able to catch this. Sneaky! SpaceX has now stacked the nose cone onto the payload bay door. This works by lifting the uppermost section of the vehicle before setting it on top of the next highest section and welding them together. This is repeated until the vehicle is complete, meaning that starships are stacked from the top down. And this is exactly why we first saw these two sections before any others. Until the vehicle grows larger, we won't be able to see it inside the high bay, so currently we just have to keep an eye on new sections as they come out. On the topic of Block 2 starships, it is important to mention that SpaceX is focused not only on Flight 7 hardware, but also on flights beyond. In our most recent flyover, our photographer John spotted this new Block 2 flap, which was sitting outside of the Star Factory. This is similar to the flap we saw in the same location a couple of weeks ago, except this time it is for a ship further down the line. Since Ship 30 already has its flaps and Ship 34 is likely fabricated inside the Star Factory, this flap is most likely for a prototype such as Ship 35 or Ship 36. It will probably be moved inside the factory when needed before being installed on its respective ship and being tiled. Since we're at the Star Factory, let's move to the building adjacent to it, which is even connected at the corner. Of course, I'm talking about Mega Bay 2, so let's take a look inside and see the constant progress that SpaceX is making here. Two prototypes, Ship 31 and a brand new test tank that has yet to be named, are currently located in this massive building. Our focus for today, however, is on Ship 31, the prototype that will fly on Flight 6. Its location on the Raptor installation stand in the Mega Bay makes it very difficult to spot. However, other clues point to its readiness in regards to a static fire. Thanks to our recent flyover, we were able to see that the Crab static fire stand located at Massis was positioned atop two SPM transporters. This is so that SpaceX can roll this stand back to the build site. But why? The stand was rolled to Massis along with Ship 26 for a static fire campaign that verified the design of Starbase's brand new flame trench. The decision to move static fires to Massis was to avoid closing the road every time they wanted to test a vehicle. When Ship 26 left Massis, it didn't take the stand with it. Instead, it was lifted off it and transported away separately. Now the stand seems to be returning to host a new prototype. Yep, that is right, Ship 31 could be ready to static fire. Although Ship 31 has only been on its engine installation stand for a couple of days, it could be nearing completion as SpaceX is constantly getting faster at Raptor installation. This means that it could have its engines installed soon and be positioned atop a Crab stand ahead of a static fire. This is pure speculation, but it is the only ship prototype that is ready for testing, so we might just see the first flight-ready vehicle be tested at Massis soon. And speaking of Massis, let's head over there to check how things are going. Thanks to our flyover, we are able to get a good look at how things are coming along with other equipment at our favorite test site. Along with the aforementioned crap static fire stand, we also have the new Can Crusher 2.0, which has received all but one of its outer 20 thrust simulating hydraulic rams. This confirms that the test stand is for a booster, and we can also see it's most likely for the Block 2 versions of boosters to come. We can see this thanks to another piece of equipment located just to the side of the test stand waiting to be installed. It has slots for 15 more engine rams, totaling 35 for the test stand. So Block 2 boosters will indeed ramp the engine count up from 33 to an even crazier 35. In thrust we trust. We can also see that all the pillars for the fourth segment of this Can Crusher contraption are vertical, and now they are just waiting for the 5 curved connectors. After that, we will likely see at least one more section and then find out why the heck this thing looks the way it does. Moving on now, we have been talking so much about SpaceX's Super Heavy Lift Starship rocket that it can be easy to forget it isn't alone in this class of launch vehicles. NASA also has its very own Super Heavy Lift rocket, the Space Launch System, or SLS. NASA designed this rocket to return astronauts to the moon for the first time since Apollo 17 in December of 1972, 51 years ago. It's been some time. We watched its first test flight back in November of 2022, standing next to NASA's vehicle assembly building just 3 miles from Pad 39B. It launched the uncrewed Orion capsule on a 25-day trip around the moon to ensure it was ready to carry people on the same trip. The mission appeared to be a complete success, with the SLS performing flawlessly and the capsule returning safely to Earth for a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Until after the flight, when engineers discovered that the heat shield, which is supposed to flake away, taking heat with it in the process called ablation, was ablating more quickly in some parts than expected. Due to this, the crewed launch of Artemis 2 was pushed back until teams could find the cause of the problem. But now we've finally seen signs that the mission is getting closer to launch. NASA has transported the core stage of the SLS for Artemis 2 to the Kennedy Space Center. This is the rocket's main stage, providing most of the rocket's speed to get to space. It is powered by 4 of the same engines used on the space shuttle, the legendary RS-25 engine. And when I say it is powered by the same engines, I mean it. 2 of these engines have already powered space shuttle missions to space as part of the Space Shuttle Atlantis and Discovery. This will unfortunately be their last mission, as SLS, unlike the space shuttle, is not reusing engines. Instead, it's dropping them in the ocean. This news also comes on the eve of the 55th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, when the US successfully landed the first man on the moon on July 20th, 1969. That was a day. Hopefully by the 60th anniversary, people will be celebrating from our moon base. That's it for today. Remember to smash the like button, subscribe for more awesome content. This is what fuels the algorithm and it helps us immensely. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A link is in the description. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. SpaceX Apollo 11. Powerful rocket that world has ever seen.